interested to watch the Deputy Prime Minister's State of the Nation address. A bit feisty yesterday afternoon, a bit of a St. Patrick's Day vibe to it, perhaps. But yeah, certainly pushing a number of buttons for the media. And one of the areas that he did focus on a little bit was the area of how his party, New Zealand First Party, has made sure that there will be a broadening of the areas that the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the government response to COVID looks at, but at least an invitation for the public to say whether or not they want it broadened. I appreciate, though, that for some people, even those who may have strong opinions on this, it's easy to say, hey, look, what's the point? What's the point? Submitting. It's interesting that in order to have your say, you need to submit. Well, that's probably one of the points that people have against the government response to COVID, the requirement to submit. Will the government listen? Will it make any difference? Is it just too hard, too difficult, too complicated for me to have my say? Well, the Free Speech Union have jumped into this space. In fact, they're launching a website a little bit later today to help facilitate people to make submissions to the Royal Commission. Jonathan Ayling from Free Speech Union joins me now. Jonathan, kia ora, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew.
It can be a little bit intimidating, fighting City Hall or making submissions to the government. I mean, hey, people like you do it all the time. In fact, you've probably sent off 3 feisty emails to government officials before breakfast. You know, that's just how you roll. But for the average New Zealander, it may seem a little bit intimidating. Is that fair?
Look, absolutely fair. And I say, thank goodness that most Kiwis are not sitting around all day thinking about how government needs to be pushed back and kept in line. So thankfully, most people have a life and are going about living it and being productive and enjoying themselves. It is important, though, that we have some people dedicated in civil society to making sure that our democratic processes are functioning well. And so not only do we send off our own feisty emails to government to make sure that they keep the speech rights of Kiwis at the very center of what they're doing, but we also spend a lot of time making it easier, if possible, for everyday Kiwis to have their say. And that's why, for example, through the hate speech laws campaign, we had the largest public submission process ever recorded, as tens of thousands of Kiwis were able to use the software that we put out there and submit in less than 5 minutes. The DIA campaign last year, which is where the Department of Internal Affairs was looking to set up a new censorship regime. Likewise, that was the second largest public submission process, only beaten by the hate speech laws. I don't know if this COVID-19 inquiry will be as large, but likewise, again, we are releasing a website that we can access later today. And I should remember what that URL is, but I'm blanking on it at the moment. But if you're on our mailing list, you'll be able to receive that, and that way, thousands and hopefully tens of thousands of Kiwis will be able to contribute to this really important reflection on this major event in recent history.
FSU is the place to go to, although put the NZ there, otherwise you end up at Florida State University. Having said that, though, there will be people who are a bit nervous. You know, there is the opportunity perhaps for you to break your own record in this regard and get more submissions than ever before. It is a topic that people are likely to have strong opinions on either way. And it is perhaps a topic that people feel like finally the gag has come off. Finally, they have the opportunity to say what it felt like to them and what their experience was. There's something quite cathartic in that process. I'm expecting there's going to be a lot of people wanting to have their say.
That's right, and Andrew, we have to keep in mind what the stakes were, or at least what we perceived the stakes were at the start. There was the view that this stood to be the most fatal pandemic in a century, and so major steps were taken to address that, and on one side of the ledger, based with what we were facing, there was an argument for that. On the other side of the ledger, some people say, but that wasn't what was actually occurring. And as the process went on, as COVID-19 went on, we didn't learn from our mistakes. We didn't reassess the strategy that we had in place. And so both sides need to be able to come to this conversation. And I would say there are many people that would claim that this has been one of the most suppressed conversations in recent memory. That we're not through necessarily outright prohibition of discussing certain claims or perspectives, though there certainly was out and out censorship, but more generally through the subtle chilling effect of, well, you're not supposed to say that. What do you want grannies to die?
Yep.
Type narratives. A lot of people have been able to have felt that they have not been able to speak out in areas like universities where academics did not feel like they were able to contribute, or in response to the podium of truth, where within the government space and with respect to government policies we were not able to dissent. But I would say most of all it was just a general impression, and this is quite abstract, it doesn't seem very concrete, but just the general impression that we weren't supposed to dissent, we weren't supposed to disagree, we were the team of 5 million.
Yeah.
Well, now we actually all get to have our say, and it's possible we'll see that narrative emerge slightly differently.
Now, of course, some people would say there's already been a bit of a mandate shown there in the results of the last general election, and certainly probably was one of the factors for the result there. This is an opportunity to go a bit deeper than 2 ticks on a ballot box, though, and to say, hey, this is what I feel, this is why I feel it was like this. There will be people, though, as I mentioned in my introduction, that may be thinking, gosh, does it make a difference? What's the point? Yeah, okay, I can have a little bit of a rant, I can express my feelings in the submission, but what difference will it actually make to what happened back in the day and the way we do things in the future? Is it just a rant, or is it going to make a difference, do you think?
No, I certainly always insist that our democratic processes and the opportunities we have and the duties we have, I think, to engage in these forums makes a difference. Is it a silver bullet? No. Will your submission be the one thing that changes New Zealand's direction on this issue? No. But was almost 20,000 Kiwis submitting on the hate speech laws enough to get the government to backtrack on that? Yes. Was 15,000 people submitting on the DIA proposals enough to get that sidelined? Absolutely. And there's so many other examples where even if it isn't a comprehensive victory, I don't even know what victory would look like in this case, but it's still informing the tone. We actually not only have the right to do this, we have the duty to do this. Our democratic system doesn't exist only to give us 2 votes every 3 years.
Yep.
We actually really have to participate in this consultative radical experiment that we all get a say. We all get to participate in democracy and in our governance. And so I would say at the moment, the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the COVID-19 experience is expanding its terms of reference. Yep. So right now, if this afternoon and this evening your listeners decide to use our tool to submit, and they can find that at fsu.nz, then they get to have a view in what the conversation will be around this. And when the COVID-19 inquiry was first announced, it was very narrow. It was really only targeted at, well, did our response save lives?
Yeah.
And the reality is, not being an epidemiologist, we have to really get really good at denoting that nowadays, because apparently otherwise everyone's like, oh, are you an epidemiologist?
Yeah.
But no, I'm not an epidemiologist, but the reality is, I think probably if we locked up New Zealand every winter, probably fewer people would die from the flu.
Yep.
And so I think probably there's not much doubt that our response meant fewer people died from COVID. Was that the right call, though? Well, that's the broader question.
Mm-hmm.
What about loneliness? What about education? What about the economy? What about inflation?
Yeah.
What about religious freedoms?
Mm-hmm.
And the right to participate in worship? These are all questions that many insist were not given the sufficient weight during the crisis, and that's why now we must go, well, next time it comes around, because it will come around again in some shape or form, how do we want to respond at that point? And so at the moment, for the next week, we've got the opportunity to submit on what this consultation should include, and we're insisting that at the moment it doesn't include a reflection on the implication this had for speech and conscience rights, and that this inquiry must look at the way our COVID-19 response impacted on freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and freedom of conscience. And then more broadly, once we get into the actual consultation period, we will then be able to provide our supporters with the opportunity to tell their stories. And it's a duty democratically, but as you said from the start there, Andrew, I think it's cathartic as well. And I do think there's a community in New Zealand, a portion of people who have felt entirely alienated in this process over these past few years. And this will almost have a truth and reconciliation type impact, where hopefully we're able to bring some communities back together. And that is the radical role of free speech, to enable dialogue, to facilitate that debate, and actually social cohesion relies on that.
I mean, Jonathan, you talked about the difference that previous record-breaking submissions facilitated by the Free Speech Union have had. I would go further to say that this is more likely to have an impact because we've got a situation here where the government has changed. Whereas when there were submissions about hate speech law, the government was not necessarily in favour of the way in which the submissions were trending. But with a change of government and a royal commission which is looking at what the previous government did wrong, I imagine that this will get great coverage, that this will have significant impact. This isn't something which the current government is going to bury. They're going to want to shine a light on this one, if anything, to make the previous Labour government look bad and to help point out their mistakes.
That's right. And so I would say there is that opportunity. I hope it doesn't turn into an overly politicized process that then means if it is a Labour government again in the future who is responding to a pandemic, they say, oh, well, that inquiry doesn't count. It was just a political hit job. But certainly your point is absolutely correct, Andrew, that internationally we've seen these processes when they have been open to proper engagement and not just narrowly circumspect. We've seen them quite dramatic, actually. You look at what happened in Scotland with the trial of Nicola Sturgeon there, or Boris Johnson and the way he had to answer for his misdemeanors during that whole process. I think there stands to be some real accountability and transparency, which hasn't occurred to date on this issue.
Now, this website is going to be launched a little bit later this afternoon. Check out details, fsu.nz. Jonathan, thanks for the work you do. Thanks for joining us once again.
Pleasure, Andrew. Cheers.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.